Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Stephen with you on this week's 10-minute Torah. So this week's 10-minute Torah is Tetzaveh, God's commanding. It's from mitzvah, right? Mitzvah, Tetzaveh, command. So before we get into that, as usual, little discussion of what's going on. And as I think I've made the point before, to me, this is like the spring high holidays. And we started, in a sense, informally with Tu B'Shvat. And Tu B'Shvat, as the name in Hebrew applies, is the 15th of the month of Shabbat, and it is the New Year of Trees. It is basically just a day. There's nothing really special about that in traditional Judaism. It was only during the Middle Ages that the Kabbalists, created what is ultimately the first Earth Day. They wanted to honor the trees, honor their produce, um, with a day that really all it is just a common day. You plant a new tree, you leave it alone for 3 years, let it develop, let it really get its fruit going or its produce going. In the fourth year, that produce goes to the priests and the ministers, the Kohanim and the Levites, as an offering. And then after that, of course, 10% of tithe goes to the upkeep of the temple, but the rest of it is pretty much now you're enjoying your produce. Okay, so there's a little bit of a story about Hillel and Shammai. These two, as you may remember, were great sages, and they had various schools during the Talmudic period. Hillel was sort of the liberal of his day. Shammai was kind of the conservative. And typically, whenever they had a disagreement, it kind of went to Hillel because he was liberal, but he was also very progressive and very humane. Not that Shammai wasn't, but Shammai was more like, this is what it says, this is what you do. He was very much into dogma, whereas Hillel believed in, you know, not being so involved in dogma. Really the important thing is people. Again, not that Shammai didn't believe in helping people, but he thought the way to helping people was to stick to the law. Hillel was a little bit looser. There is, and the point here is that the reason we have the New Year for trees pretty much in our modern month of February, the secular month of February, is that's when plants really start to get flowering. That's when the rains start to taper off a little bit. Not so much in our case here, right? But yeah, it's about the time when you start thinking about the new harvesting season, and that date was pretty much chosen. Shammai thought it should be the first of Shabbat. It would be Rishon Shabbat, whereas Hillel thought it should be the 15th. There is kind of a little bit of a story that goes along. That's from the Tractate of Shabbat between these two folks, these two guys. You might have heard it, but here's kind of the way the story is right out of the Talmud. I've heard various versions of it, but what happens is a guy wanted to convert. He was interested in converting to Judaism, or what is today Judaism. And he showed up at Shammai's house first and said, "Teach me Torah while I'm standing on one leg." As kind of a test. And Shammai was also sort of a carpenter. He took this builder's edge thing and started smacking the guy until he went away. Um, he then showed up at Hillel's house and asked the same question: "Teach me Torah while I'm on one leg." And Hillel looks at him and says, "Whatever is hateful to you, don't do to other people." And he converted him on the spot. Kind of the difference between Hillel and Shammai. So we've got Purim coming up, first weekend in the secular month of March. So the first Friday of March, March 3rd, we'll be doing Shabbat across America. It's sort of an informal service that an organization called NJOP promotes to get everybody thinking more Shabbat. But to do that, it's going to be sort of an informal service. So we're going to be doing it in the social hall. We're going to be talking about why we do things, spending more time on that than the actual, prayer service. Although it will still be a service. Give you a chance to ask questions. We'll have some goodies. So, and then Sunday, the 5th, we will have a little bit of a Hebrew school, then a Purim carnival. Hopefully, it won't rain. And then in the next day, March 6th, that evening we'll be reading the Megillah. And then, of course, the first weekend of April, give or take or so, we will be observing Passover, which is, by the way, the New Year, the secular New Year. So kind of a couple of New Years there. counting down the Omer, the Shavuot. Okay, so, all right, so let's talk about Tetzaveh. God's commanding Moses to, well, first of all, they talk about they're finishing up doing things for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle, and it starts off with the talking about the incense. So, incense used to be very important for services. Some of you that have dabbled in like some of the Eastern philosophies know that in India, the big incense there is sandalwood. Well, in Judaism, it's frankincense. And it's not just frankincense. There's actually a mixture that goes in. There's, I believe, myrrh, there's stactate, and a few other things. But it's not a published or a known formula because it is only supposed to be used in the temple, not synagogue, temple. And there is no temple, so we don't do any incense. Very important. So you want to go off and pray and light some frankincense, go for it. Not a big deal. But the actual mixture that they use for doing the services, doing the offerings, that's a special mixture. And again, we don't touch it. There's some discussion as to um, what it was, getting the ingredients, and there's a little bit of a disagreement. And it's really kind of unfortunate, like some of the names of the animals that they talk about in the sections on kashrut that we don't really know today. I'm sure there are people in Israel right now researching it. There are people in Israel that are devoting themselves when, not should or if, but when the next temple is built, the third temple, they want to be ready and they want to be able to do the offerings as prescribed, et cetera, et cetera. I've had discussions about that with people. I think that we've been off offering so long. I believe the next temple is going to be a big synagogue. That's just me. Okay. And by the way, we don't do offerings anymore. I mean, they did this years ago in the ancient world. We don't. We were weaned off of that. So there it is. All right. So let's get to the actual rest of this portion. Tetzaveh. All right. So now that we've got all the furnishings and the actual Mishkan and how to build it, now what are the priests going to wear? Specifically, the high priest. So there's commandments now, and they are commandments. They are commandments. We don't follow them today because there is no temple, and we don't really. The priests don't have the roles that they used to. They're just called up first, and the Levites second during a Torah service. So the priest would wear, going from top to bottom, they wore a turban. And you might seen in the old days, cantors and rabbis would wear this long hat. And it's kind of a turban. On the turban, kind of, was a little plate, a little gold plate that said Kadosh La Hashem, which is like a little plate. It had strings, so you tied it here. Then there was another set of strings that came and you tied over the turban, so it was kind of held in place. And it was kind of up here so that when the priest was doing his tefillin, he had a space on his forehead to do the tefillin. They then had a robe that was a barrier between his skin and the rest of it. Then there was kind of another robe that had on the bottom little bells and little pomegranates, and the colors were kind of blue, red, and purple, turquoise. Um, Gosh, I'm forgetting the specific colors now. It's kind of escaping me. But there were those three colors, and they had a certain royalty to them. There was also there was also, when they wove them with strands of gold. So it was kind of a gold element to it as well. Then they had some white linen breeches on as well. They had a breastplate that was folded in half. It was the Urim and the Thummim. It had 12 stones, 4 rows, 3 stones each. Each stone corresponded to a different tribe. And it was held on their shoulders by 2 stones. Each one of these stones that held it on their shoulder was inscribed with 6 of the names of the tribes, and that went from order to birth. It says this in the Torah. The other one really doesn't say what order it was. It just says use a different color stone for each tribe, etch the name of the tribe on the stone, and put a little parchment, or some people think parchments, of the name of God. We think it was Yud Hey Vav Hey. Could have been other names too. We don't know at this point. It was folded over, and the idea is that the high priest would consult Hashem, and it was kind of like a Ouija board. It was like one of the few mystical, metaphysical things that the Torah talks about. When they had a question, the stones would light up, and it was up to the high priest to know which specific letters it was referring to as to interpret the answer. Do we attack now? Do we attack later? You in the case of Eli, the high priest, he was, when he was trying to figure out what Hannah was doing, the letters were mixed up. He interpreted it as she's drunk. Some people say, but actually it was just the righteous woman. So, okay, so here's the part of the idea of the dress. When you're approaching the King of Kings, the holiest of holies, the holy, blessed be He, the Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, you want to dress your best. And we even do this today. You see that as a rabbi, I'm wearing a jacket, tie, shirt. Believe me, I went through my period of time when ripped jeans, t-shirts, long hair, kind of a mess. But now, I'm representing God. I'm not your intermediary. It's just officiating. So I need to look the part. And when we come on Saturday services or Shabbat services, we kind of want to look the part too. Now I know some of you have different ways of dressing, but I guess progressively, if this is your best way of dressing, then God's going to take it that way. Maybe somebody else might think, "Oh, what are you wearing that for?" Hey, if this is what you wear, then this is what you wear. If that's how you feel in addressing God, go for it. Okay, so hope you go for services this weekend. Look forward to seeing you. Look forward to having you there for Purim, and we're going to have a lot of fun. So, Shabbat Shalom.